I wasn't giving Richard the time that he needed or he deserved. That's where our problem started from.
There were times when I felt lonely. Everyone else's needs were being looked after. I didn't see that I was doing anything for myself or anyone considered me.
We were like doing things together as a family, but then not doing things as a couple. I was one of two children, brought up in Fairfield, New South Wales. Dad was the Catholic in our family, but Mum wasn't. But she took her vows that when she got married in the Catholic Church very seriously. She agreed to bring both my brother and I up as Catholics and to foster our faith in the church.
I came from a family of 5 children. I went to a Catholic primary school run by the Sisters of St Joseph and a Catholic high school run by the Patrician Brothers. Went to church most Sundays and I was an altar boy by the time I was about 8 or 9 until about I was 13, 14.
I met Richard when I was 15. I actually saw Richard at the railway station and used to admire him from afar. And I knew his younger brother, so we used to see one another at the CYS dances, which was the Catholic younger set. So they used to have church dances and outings. So I met Richard through that.
From there, we sort of started talking at a couple of dances, and then she asked me if I'd be a partner at her graduation, and which meant lots of dance practices and things like that. And by that time I had my licence, so I was able to pick her up in the family car and take her to practices and then to her graduation.
Richard returned the favour and invited me to his Year 12 graduation, and it just went from there. Richard was 18 and I was 15, so we were quite young. We went out together for 4.5 years, and then Richard popped the question, and our dream, well, my dream, started to come true.
And we're always going to get married in a Catholic church. There was never any doubt that would happen.
We had been married about 3.5 years when our first son, Joel, came along. And then when Joel was about 8 months old, we decided to have another child, and I guess that's when we started having a few troubles. We had a couple of miscarriages, so that caused a little bit of pain in our marriage because it was a trying time, the waiting and the disappointment during that time, and I used to cry a lot.
Tracey was down, and then I didn't know why, but I probably didn't sympathise with her as much as I could have or should have.
And then we were blessed with our daughter Jessica, and she's there was 4 years between them, but we kept praying and we finally got her. And then 16 months later came our third child, Liam.
It meant a few sacrifices from both our sides. You know, Tracey and I agreed that she would be home to bring up the children. So she left her job, and I suppose back then maternity leave wasn't a thing anyway, as much. And so we were down to one wage. You know, that had I suppose the effect on me personally was that I had to give up my golf membership. I used to play golf on a Saturday, so I gave that up.
I just thought family life was about all of us being together. Later on, as time went on, I realised that I wasn't giving Richard the time that he needed or he deserved. That's where our problem started from. At one point, he actually felt he came behind the dog. So that really hurt.
I suppose the dynamic of having three changes, because at least when you've got two children, you've got two parents who can look after a child each in a way. I was hands-on-ish. I would change nappies and help out, but there were certain things I probably wouldn't have done.
For a while there, we went through a little bit of a rough patch in just not communicating as well, getting irritable with one another. We didn't always, apart from the family things, we didn't really look at doing things together as a couple, and that's where difficulties in our marriage came from. Nearly 5 years later, our fourth child, Dylan, and I guess Richard felt that he just went further down the line.
With each child, it sort of meant that the dynamic between Tracey and I changed in a way because we had someone else to look after. I was getting very morose and very inward and not communicating much. There were times when I felt lonely in the household because everyone else's needs were being looked after, and I, probably of the opinion that mine were the last ones to be looked after. I probably saw that I didn't see that I was doing anything for myself or anyone considered me. And it was a time that we were out, the whole six of us were out on an outing where Tracey could see that I might have been physically there, but I wasn't mentally there. And she asked me what was wrong. And I told her that I'd felt that, I was being left behind or not left out, but I just didn't feel as though I had the same sort of consideration in our marriages as what I thought it might have been. I'd always thought that there'd be, plenty of time for Tracey and I, and that would ongoing. I wasn't naive enough that I'd think that I'd always get as much time as I wanted.
We talk a bit, it does get a little bit louder in volume, but then it stops and then we icing. It's more about the no eye contact. It's just pleasantries, with that coldness rather than yelling. Yeah, we're not real yellers and screamers, which I'm grateful for. But occasionally you get frustrated when you've been married for a long time. It's part and parcel because sometimes we get very self-centered about what our needs are, and we don't always consider the other person's needs. We see our needs as more important. And then from that, I guess I found that the children's needs were more important, and then I couldn't understand why he felt left out. I couldn't understand that because he was the dad. He was part of it. He was there with us. He was there in body, but not necessarily emotionally, I guess. Probably emotionally, but mentally there.
At that stage, I wasn't one for being outward in what I was thinking. I'd keep it to myself, which, as I found out later, can cause me to blow up in a way when it actually does come out, and and sometimes make a situation worse than what it needs to because of what I've been holding in, or if I get real introspective, I'll think about things too much, and then when they do come out, it just it's out of proportion of what really needs to be.
We might go for a few days not really talking. I guess sometimes we were like living in the same house and doing things together as a family, but then not doing things as a couple, doing those things separately. Yeah, so almost like single.
I was never one to initiate to say sorry or please forgive, so sometimes there'd be that coldness between us, that it might go on for a number of days until sometimes it'd be Tracey saying, well, aren't you going to say something? Or I'm sick of you being quiet. And then I'd end up saying sorry or, But there would, so those times obviously weren't very pleasant. And it was, so they did cause us issues.
Money was always, pretty tight with children. We didn't, we lived from month to month. Back then we probably used to fight more about money and family. After the children came along, for a while we fought about money and family.
I felt the pressure with that because, I was, being the only money earner, I saw it as my job and to provide that, and I was failing in that. Because we're still only on one wage, it made it harder to do things as a family. We couldn't really go on holidays because we'd have to look at where we could go and in terms of the cost involved.
When you've been married, we've been married 38 years, and it's not easy. You go through stages that it's great and it brings you joy, and then you go through times or hardships or sorrow, and it's hard and it's tough, and some people might walk away, but I guess because the love I feel for Richard, that I could never do that to him.
Yeah, there was times when I was unhappy, but there was never that thought of saying that's it, I'm leaving. But there were times when I was down. And
parish life was there. We were involved in the parish, but did we bring God into our marriage? I don't think so straight away.
I can't remember whether there were times I say asking God for help to get us through.
We had been invited to a marriage encounter weekend, and that changed so much from the words of what you're thinking to what you're feeling. Feeling's a huge thing. Richard shared things about our life together and about us and about even those times which had happened a long time ago, when we went on that weekend. He opened up and he shared so much more openly.
The weekend for me, I was apprehensive as to what was going to happen, but I suppose what I got out of it was having that opportunity, or that being given the tools, I suppose, to express my feelings. And then I suppose from the other side is the realisation that Tracey would accept those feelings without judging me. Prior to that, I would have been very reluctant to share feelings because I would have been worried about, what will Tracey think? What will she say back at me? Will she think I'm having a go at her about, what I'm saying? So it was that step of, getting confidence to share feelings.
Going to the marriage encounter weekend, I remember Mum coming back saying how amazing it was and how well and how much Dad had opened up to her. So I remember as I got older and Mum would talk more to me as a teenager and as a young woman, Mum would open up and we'd have deeper discussions, and going through the process of the dialoguing and talking to one another. And Mum as well, I think the biggest thing she got out of that weekend was realising that feelings aren't wrong, it's what you're feeling. That actually helped her understand where my depression came from, and also helped her realising Dad's feelings. Just because he's feeling them doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them, doesn't mean it's just what he's feeling. And it's okay for him to feel like that. And it's okay for Mum to feel the things that she's doing, and they don't necessarily have to feel the same thing. So I think after the marriage encounter weekend, and then actually doing the dialogue and continuing with the dialogue, that's really opened up the communication between them.
Prior to the weekend, we would have thought, oh, well, you have your marriage day and that's a sacrament that happens on that day. And really from that point, that was it. But we found out, at Marriage Encounter that, your whole married life is you're living that sacrament, and how you come across in that sacrament is, has an effect on others around you. And the other thing too, we saw that God is an integral part of that sacrament. There's really three of us in our marriage. It's Tracey, me, and God. So that too was, and since then, we've become more aware of God's presence and the Spirit's presence, Holy Spirit's presence in our marriage.
Richard and I pray together, and it's not something that came easily to us, and that's one thing that has grown, I think, in our relationship and in our life is our prayer life and just our willingness to be more open about it to others. I think that's the biggest change.
I was always one to be the last to say, or leave it as long as possible to ask for forgiveness or even say sorry, and which built up that tension between us. But now I'm better at, I can't say I'm perfect at it, but I'm better at seeking forgiveness.
Asking for forgiveness when you've done something wrong and owning that you've hurt that other person. I think that's a huge part of asking for forgiveness, because we can quite easily say we're sorry, but unless we own that we've actually hurt that other person and the person that we love the most, really asking their forgiveness, you're owning that you've hurt that person.
There'll be times when I would have resented things happening, but because I was less open about letting it out, I'd hold on to it, that resentment, for a time, and it could be days holding on to it. But now I'm probably, I think I'm better at letting those things go, or at least getting to a point where where if I'm holding something or holding some hurt or resentment, I'll try and address the situation rather than stew on it and let it fester and potentially make it worse when we actually get around to discussing it.
And I think it's about listening with your heart, because, that's one thing that I'm not always great at, is listening. Listening, when I'm on the go with something. And that can be hurtful to someone too. Not paying attention to what they're saying and being, doing things and not giving them the full attention. But when you listen with your heart, it's different, isn't it?
Because we now emphasise, or we now are more conscious about us as a couple, I don't have that feeling in the family situation that I might have had in the past, in terms of feeling left out or at the bottom of the queue. Our happiness as a couple is the most important thing, and to do that we have to be equal in that coupleness in our relationship. If we were happy with each other, there's more chance that the whole family was going to be happy, because the children wouldn't be seeing us at odds with each other or not talking or whatever. So it sort of flows down, from the top, so that if you can see that that we're happy, that the whole family unit is, I suppose, more relaxed in a way as well.
Everything we do for the family and together, we talk about it first. I check with Richard. We're making those decisions together, And that's had a huge impact on him feeling part of things.
As a result of being more aware of that, I don't feel as though I'm left out or at the end of the queue anymore. Love one another as I have loved you, which really to me means don't judge. Accept people, because God accepts everyone. It means that you're taking people as they are, not without any preconceived ideas.
It equates to life. From Corinthians is, let everything be done in love. If everything we do is done in love towards our fellow man, towards our spouse, but towards our family, towards our friends, I think that's a huge one. Let everything be done in love.
Problems, worries, sadness. Are you seeking solutions?
Bible says,
Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Choose faith over fear.